Fortnite Chapter 4 releases in under 1 week's time, and in order for it to be a complete success, it needs to have these 3 things. You see, Chapter 3 and basically all of 2022 has been relatively similar. There's been a large focus on the spray meta, the map has been good, but a little similar. There's been a lot of lessons learned, as I kind of covered in my previous video. I feel like in particular for the competitive side, up until the FNCS Invitational, everything was kind of slow, players were not that motivated to play, and the announcement of Chapter 4 definitely brought back a lot of interest and a lot of hype going forward for not only the casual scene, but also the competitive scene. Chapter 4 is a fresh start, because new chapters usually have completely different loot pools, a new map, and basically everything that brings in players from every angle who like the game. If it's good, both the casual scene and the competitive scene could flourish and grow to all new highs. The first really important thing that Chapter 4 has to nail will be the map. Now, in my personal opinion, I don't necessarily want a recycle of some of the old maps. I am interested in getting something fresh, something new, similar to how Chapter 2 changed from Chapter 1. It's always good and it's always interesting to bring back old POIs, however when it comes to a completely new chapter, I do just feel like I want something fresh. We've seen Tilted Towers in pretty much every single chapter so far, and it doesn't necessarily hype me up that more when it comes back. And if there was 1 or 2 old POIs split across the map, I'd be completely fine with that, but I don't think I would be that happy going back to a Chapter 1 map or a Chapter 2 map, for example. And I know a lot of people are very interested in bringing back the Chapter 1 map. However, if you actually look at it from a competitive and a casual side, that map was really not that well balanced. There was an incredibly huge amount of vertical hills that in any endgame scenario could completely ruin one single endgame. And I dropped Polar Peak as my main drop, so I'm very familiar with how that can play out. Now, I'm sure having a bunch of old Chapter 1 POIs may be a good marketing stunt for casuals to bring them into the game, and I'm not necessarily against it, but it has to be done very well from just a map design POV so that it's balanced for competitive. Nostalgia is great and it gets people interested, but ultimately the map actually just has to be good in order for people to play it and enjoy it for a full year. A good map is useless without a good meta. In order for this to work really well, I think there has to be a good balance of competitiveness and fun. I feel like Chapter 3 Season 4, the season we're currently in, has done a really good job of that for multiple reasons. Maybe if you just get rid of the Chrome AR because of the structure damage is just far too much. One way in which that can be done is for useful and new and interesting utility items, for example. There's been some really interesting ones, such as the cow catchers, chrome splashes. However, these have really only lasted for 1 single season and have never become a staple of the meta. However, there's not really any new mobility staples or utility staples that have stayed for season upon season. I think having interesting utility items makes high-level competitive and casual games much more fun. A zero mobility, zero utility meta like Chapter 2 Season 1 is good and it's competitive, however it is a little stale and a little boring. If there's more interesting utility items put into the game, you know, like shield bubbles, which I've talked about 100 million times, chrome splashes, as I already mentioned, were good fun too, and not overpowered, then the game can strike a nice balance between fun and competitive. And a fun and balanced meta, of course, heavily will also look at the weapons. Now, a lot of Chapter 3 has been very reliant on spray weapons, be it SMGs, or this season there's the Chrome AR, which has an incredibly high amount of structure damage. Now, in my opinion, and in a lot of the community's opinions, these weapons are not very rewarding and can be very frustrating to fight against. So I hope in Chapter 4 that we go back to a much better shotgun-based meta. So for me, I'm a fan of the pump, and also if it's a bigger team mode, I'm definitely a fan of the charged shotgun as well. And in particular, metas without pumps are not bad, but whenever it comes back to a season which involves the pump shotgun after that, I feel like all of the fights are just more satisfying. The game just feels smoother to me when the pumps are in the meta. The Prime shotgun and the Ranger shotgun we have right now are good shotguns, and I think they're balanced reasonably well for the meta. However, they're kind of clunky, the reload speed is slow, and that additional time and clunkiness just makes fights feel a little bit less rewarding. However, on the flip side, if Zero Build is going to stay part of the casual game and the competitive side of the game, I hope that they keep those loot pools the same as pubs. And by that I mean if there's any crazy items in pubs, that these also go into the competitive side of Zero Build. This is mainly for 2 reasons. Firstly, it makes Zero Build more interesting to watch, because Zero Build is kind of boring, quite frankly, when you watch even a high-level tournament of it. Secondly, what'll be interesting is if all of these crazy items are still within competitive Zero Build, then it'll be very easy for pub players who don't really play tournaments just to move over into zero build and already understand what the meta is because it's similar to the games they're playing on a daily basis. I think this also just then allows a place for the OG chaos that people really enjoyed about the original kind of chapter 1 of Fortnite. And this also means that it's easier to keep out of the build mode. There's more incentive for Epic to hardcore split the loot pools so that building mode and the high level things like FNCS, if there's any lands, arena, all of those loot pools can be completely split from what is the zero build pub loot pool. This becomes particularly important when we look at keeping a game interesting for the next 5 or 10 years. Now with Creative 2.0, the casuals will probably be happy with that already, and with the collabs, the way that the casual side of the game's going, I'm not really concerned about that. But most games succeed in the long run, like Counter-Strike for example, by having a strong competitive scene and a strong competitive community. Large events that players practice for that get tons of eyes and viewers on them, and of course players who stick around for years and years to practice and to play. The players who stick around for the longest are also the players who end up spending the most money, so it's a bit of a win-win if there's a strong competitive scene and a strong casual scene. So what does Chapter 4 need from a competitive side to continue this game's success into the future? Well, as we saw this year, the interest in competitive really slowly started to go down with just online FNCS and tournaments like that. They're pretty repetitive, although they're great and a good staple for the community. Online FNCS, as it wasn't really bringing the eyeballs. It really wasn't creating that much interest for really any type of viewership. And that's for a couple of main reasons. The first one is that you didn't know what was special, what was important. Basically, we had, 13 FNCS that were all online across the last few years, and it really negated the effect of being called an FNCS champion. In Chapter 2, Season 3, I stopped putting FNCS champion in the title of my videos because I realized that it wasn't actually bringing more clicks because people weren't interested in that all the way back then. So now I think one of the most important things going forward is that there's just something that one stage bigger than that, something that each year we know is going to be really important. These are the best players, this is the biggest title that they can win, and of course that's going to be World Cup. Everyone can name who won the World Cup back in 2019, but I guarantee you can't name every single FNCS winner from every single region. Massive events like World Cup and the FNCS Invitational that were on last year are an absolute critical part in my eyes of keeping the competitive scene interesting for the future going on and giving people interesting talking points that the viewers actually care about as well. And I think a really important note on that is that stuff carries over season to season. Say for a World Cup or just any form of LAN in-person event, there's qualifiers in one season and then the LAN in the next one. One big issue that I think a lot of people forget about is the fact that you have to get players to the LAN. You have to book the flights, they have to get visas, all of these different things. So after players have qualified, there needs to be a specific period of time that they can then go to the event because they need to be able to sort these things out. So say if there was in Chapter 4 Season 1, we had online qualifiers for a big LAN event in Chapter 4 Season 2, and then did that again on the other half of the year. That would be amazing. You have storylines that follow from season to season, you have massive events that players can watch, and then your performance in those could maybe even qualify you or give you a boost going into the season ahead of that as well. In terms of game mode, I do think the main game mode should be trios. We had a full year of trios, we had a full year of duos. It's pretty obvious in my eyes which one was better, and that was trios. However, I do think we need to have a staple of solo tournaments as well. Be that solo cash cups, solo late game cups, whatever it is. This season, there was a real lack of that, and it was actually noticed on Twitter. I never thought I would see pro players complaining about having no solo cash cups, but here we are. On top of that, I do think there also needs to be some sort of large solo tournament. If there's going to be a World Cup next year and it's the main game mode, which, in my eyes should be trios, there should also be a solo event at another part. If it's part of that World Cup, awesome. But if not, another tournament like the All-Stars, where we had a bunch of different interesting creative tests and then a solo event at the end of that too. If you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe, of course. Let me know what you want. Peace.